Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Cognitively CRE. Hey, it's December, so happy holidays and happy New Year to everybody. Much appreciated. You joining us live today. If you're watching the recorded session, thanks for watching. Very excited today. We have Sabine M., who's going to cover a good topic related to digital tools, examples of digital tools that can be used for workplace directors and to gather workplace insights. But we're also going to talk about the why that you would need these. And we're going to give some examples and some good insights and some good advice, I think, on how you can take that first step. So with that, let me welcome Sabine. Hey, Sabine, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. So, hey, let's get some context for the audience. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself, and your background. And one of the things that I often ask that you don't necessarily have to answer, but you could, is what is your superpower? If you don't mind, quick introduction.
Yeah, so that's actually a good cue. So I would say that my superpower is that I make worlds meet, because I work in a tech company, but my background is in real estate. So I have studied real estate management and I have worked in corporate real estate for several years in different roles. And now at Locity, where I am at, I am able to tune into theory, trends, and discussions and bring that into our organization, and at the same time make the utility that our company is offering to the industry visible there.
Very good. Thank you for that. Let's hop right in. We got some really good topics to talk about. Let me add this slide. So this, kind of the first topic, and it's interesting, right? This isn't necessarily true for everyone where you're sitting at your kitchen table working, but it's certainly true for many of us. And it's the way that we work today, but is it really the future of work? What's some of your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I mean, when the pandemic hit, when we started in that model, I think we've all seen perks of this model of working at home, working remotely, testing out productivity. I've actually seen feedback that people enjoyed time away from their colleagues, for starters, to be really on focused work, not being distracted by people approaching them on the desk and the boss in the office. So there is upsides to this, as long as your home allows for an appropriate setup for you to work in. But we're missing things. And now in many, many countries, we are in the second wave, and we're starting to get fatigued with being on Zoom calls, because interacting with a screen, two-dimensional, is just not the same as meeting someone. Our brain reacts very differently to an actual human interaction than it does to looking at a screen. So we're missing an important element currently, which is the connection to our colleagues and the collaboration and the spirit of a community and belonging. So that's why I think it will not be the future to always work from your kitchen table or a corner in your home. It might be occasionally when it fits with the type of work that you want to do, if you want to have that focused time, or if it just comes handy, you don't want to commute for a long time, and it is adapted to what you need at that moment.
I completely agree. And the data that we are seeing certainly suggests that as well. Early on, some of the data that I saw, survey data from Leesman and others, suggested that working from home was working well, and things felt really good. And then over time, what we're starting to see, exactly to what you said, is a little bit of fatigue. Zoom fatigue is starting to set in. The video call fatigue is starting to set in. So what it feels like, and what we believe is happening based on the data that we're looking at, is the future of work is really about collaboration and innovation. Now, we might be, because there's two main camps here, right? We might have said some things that people disagree with, or we might have said some things that people strongly agree with. So for you in the audience, we absolutely want to get interactive with what you're doing, with what we're doing. If you're on YouTube, viewing this on the live stream on YouTube, on the right-hand side of the column is a way for you to provide comments, insights, and questions to us. we'd love those. We'll make an introduction for the people who made those comments and questions, and we'll bring you into the conversation. So by all means, at any time, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to bring those into that chat session. Now, Sabine, the future of work. Will it be in the office, and will it be different? What's the thoughts here?
So the thought it is going to be different for sure, because we have learned many things during this period. We have learned that remote working is an option because there has been bias towards it in many organizations still, and from many managers and employees themselves as well. So we know it is an option, but we also know that there's things we're missing. And I think very much as we've seen in retail with the omni-channel evolution, we're actually going to see more of a curated workplace experience. So the same way that actually online retailers who have been pure online businesses started to open shops because they acknowledge that consumers do like the experience of going somewhere physically and browsing for stuff. Mm-hmm. Office workers and employees still cherish going to a place and having that sense of belonging and purpose, very similar to what co-working already has provided. Because why co-working worked actually, because usually it's like not necessarily colleagues from the same organization, but freelancers who could have worked at home but chose to go there, is that it provided a certain sense, a certain feeling. And I've actually read a quote recently that said, the true measure of space is how it makes us feel. And that is something that companies will have to provide more, or that they will have to foster more, providing a certain sense of what the company wants to convey through their workspace. And I've actually talked to customers who were saying they don't view their office necessarily as a space anymore where people come to work, but actually as a space where they come to connect with their peers. Mm-hmm.
You know, that it's interesting in that when we think of just normal cognitive function, how our brain works, how we contemplate and how we focus and how we innovate and collaborate and communicate, it becomes very interesting when we put ourselves away in our offices by ourselves and we don't have that human, real-time human interaction. There's so much of our communication that's unspoken and understood, and it's very difficult to get that through a video call. And I agree with you. I think primarily when we hear large companies say, "Hey, we're not going to do work from home. We're definitely going to have an office," and then other large companies say exactly the opposite. It's perfectly fine to work from home. I think really what we're hearing is there's companies that understand the power of innovation, human connection, and they're striving to ensure that they find a way to get back to that. So yeah, I completely agree. I do think though the office is going to be different from what we've had in the past. In fact, we'll touch on that a little bit as we move forward. But this thinking, go ahead, Sabine, sorry.
I just want to say, I also think there's still going to be variations to what offices are going to look like, just because different companies have different purposes and conduct different types of work. So a bank office will still look very different from, I don't know, a marketing agency office. So that comes quite naturally. But there's certain factors that everybody acknowledges now as crucial to have a workplace that is performing well.
Completely agree. So Sabine, we have a really good comment from a friend of the show, actually, Maxine Morrison. So I'm going to bring that up right now. Hey, Maxine, good to see you. Your picture. Thanks for the comment. So her comment is COVID really forced working from home, right? So trust has definitely been created with managers, and it is a proven model that you can work from home, where before it was very selective role and individual work styles and leadership styles were at play there. I completely agree. And what I think is what we're saying, Maxine, is generally speaking, that it's perfectly fine to work from home. We can be productive working from home. What we don't believe, what the data shows, what won't be successful for us in the long term is for everyone to always work from home. There has to be a space for us to get together in an experience that's very difficult for us to get elsewhere. It helps us to innovate and to communicate in those nonverbal cues, right? To make sure that we have this very human-centric connection with the teams. Yep. Give me 1 second here we go. Yeah. So speaking of the hierarchy of needs, there's a great slide that Sabine you brought to us. Tell us a little bit about this, the hierarchy of needs as it relates to in a post-pandemic world.
Yeah, so this is leaned on Maslow's hierarchy of basic human needs, but this is now basic corporate real estate needs in terms of technology. So the core needs focus around operating the building. And those technologies will be applied across the board from nearly all corporate real estate organizations. So if a corporate real estate organization is quite young in having a centralized role, for example, they will be low on the maturity curve when it comes to technology. So the tools that are in those core needs section will be the ones that they get first on board and then to handle. And then once they move along this maturity process, growing, educating themselves on how to handle data, how to handle these tools, they will get additional technology from the other sections that we see here, which is in the next area, space needs. So looking more at space analytics, for example, and space efficiency. And then at the tip of the pyramid, typically is the employee experience. So tools that revolve around that. But now what we've seen, or what I believe is going to happen, is that this pyramid has been turned upside down, because building operation, as much as buildings still needed to be operated, wasn't crucial anymore for employees to do their jobs. So actually, the aspect of the office as a resource or as the place where work is conducted has gone away. So you could have had the most efficient office portfolio in the world. It wouldn't have helped you, because the crucial factor now was employees and their well-being, how they felt about it, and how you could support them still being productive, but still also feeling connected to the company and its mission. So that's why we believe these more human-centric tools revolving around experience in the workplace will become more important. And we actually do see that corporate real estate organizations are actively looking for solutions to provide that, to cater for that factor.
Yeah, that's really key. It really is. And it's a change in the language and the approach that we've taken from corporate real estate and workplace and commercial real estate. It's becoming much more aware of what the occupants in that space need to feel better and to truly be more productive, right? Some of the things that we used to talk about, just speaking very generally, right, is maybe we had branding at the top of our mind. Maybe we had the right location because it was next to our customers, and we kind of made everybody go to the office. And it wasn't really with the thought in mind that what's the absolute best thing to do for the occupants to make them feel safe, to ensure health and wellness, to help them communicate and collaborate in very meaningful ways, and to measure those functions and to ensure that you're optimizing those functions. So I think that's really ultimately one of the better things that's happened in this post-pandemic world, is we now have a really good view, top of mind, if you will, of what the occupants need in that space and how to make that better for them. And that's really accelerated a few things, which I think is our next slide, actually. Health and wellness we've been thinking about health and wellness and bringing that in through IWBI and Fitwell in the standards, biophilic design, things of that nature. But that was a slow moving process. I think there maybe are a lot of trends that are changing these days that are being accelerated. Sabine, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I've been around being a corporate real estate manager for some of the pilots around flexible working and activity-based working a decade ago. And honestly speaking, those projects had not been, or these concepts have not been rolled out to whole portfolios as of yet. A lot of times, rightfully so, because it does make sense to only do it when you already have a project and just can fit it in as well, because we know that real estate projects, they require a lot of cost and effort to move people around. So not criticizing the approach in generally, but what we see now is, and what we've heard from many corporate real estate leaders actually, is that the industry has been accelerated very much because they didn't have to prove concepts anymore. It was very clear to everyone, it is very clear to everyone anymore now that activity-based working does work. So we're one step ahead. And also a lot of the technologies now have been tested. When I think back, like I actually think 5 to 6 years ago, although the technology was around, I never had video calls. It was always still the telephone. And now that we're looking for that connection, we're actually really testing these technology, and there's a broader acceptance for it. But at the same time, we don't know what the future, nobody knows what the future holds, but especially in this, we don't really know how many employees will come back to the office. In a way, all companies are now at the same point, having most of their staff remotely and having to think about what their future office should look like, how they can support their employees best. And in terms to do that, it is very important to look at data. So many companies are doing that with pulse checks with their employees. But as we know, our perception of ourselves does not always necessarily match objective measurements. So what you've just brought up is actually what we have looked at across the data that we see office occupancy around the world. And we started actually in January looking at the data. And what you see here actually is quite interesting, that even in January, February, March, utilization was not 100%. And it was not around the 80 to 90% targets, which is already actually a sign that the workplaces we had before were probably not the best solution for everyone. That goes along with people having burnout, for example. So there were in these indications that the workplaces provided are not 100% what is actually needed. They were around before the pandemic. But we have a new focal point now where we can start and build something new and truly adapt it to other values that an office can drive.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there to unpack, and it's and have some really great conversations on. So prior to the pandemic, it was generally understood that office occupancy rates, again, speaking very general, very generic terms, it was around 50%, 50 to 60%. So people were starting to ask questions, typically the CFO starting to ask questions. Why do we have so much space if it's only utilized 50 to 60% of the time? And then you had to uncover what utilization meant and what your employees were doing and how they were doing it in the space. And right about that time, from an industry perspective, is when the pandemic hit. So good and bad, right? We now have an opportunity to really think about what's happening from an occupant, from a human perspective. What do they need in order to be productive and happy and healthy in terms of support tools from both corporate real estate and enterprise technologies, even make sure those two things are aligned in order to make workplace something that's very functional. In fact, that's a really good segue. I wish I planned that, but that worked really well. I want to give you guys some insights into what's happening with a company called Unispace. They're a global leader, architectural firm. You may have caught one of our past shows that they were a part of. What they have come up with is something called the outcomes-based workplace. And really what they're showing on the left-hand side is what was a fairly traditional densified office. On the right-hand side is a space that we believed and now is proving out to be a functional space of the future. And I don't want to get too deep into this, but ultimately on the right-hand side, what we're seeing is a space that doesn't have a lot of areas to do heads down focus work. You don't have a lot of space that you can assign someone to come and sit. You don't have a lot of space where you come in and do emails, but you do have some really cool collaboration spaces and innovation spaces, and spaces that help you socialize with others in your work group. And what we've been able to prove out here is in that type of an environment, you're able to create an experience that is unique to your brand and your culture and supports the ability of increasing collaboration and ultimately innovation in the space. Now, if we were to pilot something, we have really good predictive data in order to pilot a space and the technology that goes into that space. But how do we optimize it? And so I think that is the really good question, and what the meat, if you will, of this conversation. You have to have really good data, real-time data, measurements, metrics, and KPIs to understand how your new workplace is supporting the people in the space. Sabine, is that an accurate statement? Or is there other things we might say?
I would add that it should not only be live data, but it should be continuous data that you can look at over time. Because when it comes to real estate, you don't want to make a decision based on 2 weeks observational study. You want to have a data foundation that is rock solid, and where you can rule out seasonality and extraordinary events. Because I've been present for some of the manual studies where people were running to their desks being like, I just got coffee, but I'm still occupying this desk. So that's not what you want to happen. You want to have the real data.
Yeah. So Maxine, thank you again for this excellent comment and question. What are the new tools you think will trend upwards to help organizations cater to heightened human experience? And man, there's so many. But let me back up a little bit and say, I think even the way that we would normally have technology in the office space, we have AV gear in the conference rooms. We're still going to have AV gear in the conference rooms. However, I think the way we use it will be different. And I don't want to get too deep into that conversation even, but you have to be able to ensure an excellent connection between your remote workers or the work from home workers and the in-office folks. And the way that we're communicating today is with our laptops, with a camera, and we all have a view of each other. We all have the face shot of each other. Traditionally, when we were in the office, the way that technology was set up was a presentation broadcast. You might have a room camera where you have 10 or 15 people in a room, and then 1 or 2 people as endpoints. And that's very difficult to have meaningful communication that way, even from a remote perspective. So there's one we have to look at, how do we use technology differently? The next question is, what is the difference in technology? It's quite profound. And again, beyond the scope of this call, but the technology that we're using today to work is pretty much technology we can go to Best Buy and pick up. It's all self-installed. It's done in the cloud. It's easy to use. And if there's anything that I can say as an opinion, is most of the technology that we deployed in enterprise systems in the past has not necessarily been the easiest to use. So that's going to be a key trend. The next key trend is going to be really focusing on mobility, your Wi-Fi access, basically, not just have it, and most times Wi-Fi was treated as a secondary thing in offices. It's going to be primary now. You probably won't have a fixed PC in your space. It's going to be your laptop, your mobile device, your compute device that you're going to be bringing from space to space. Again, just like you're doing now. So we really have to rethink that. But even more so is, what if we were able to get data from those enterprise systems and applications to inform us if we had the right space, the right mix of space, and the right types of technology. And that ultimately is where we're headed. That would have been cool if I was able to make that next slide transition quickly, but I had to do this. There we go. So what we see in this scale, and I'm going to ask Sabine to describe this to us a little bit, but on the left-hand side, what we see is some very important things to think about from an enterprise IT system in order to generate data to help us better understand what's happening in the space. On the right-hand side, a little outside the scope of this conversation, but that's just an example of the systems typically deployed by facilities that has data locked away in it in silos. And you might have some of these systems deployed from a workplace strategy perspective, or from a facilities perspective, from a room booking solution set. But again, they're very functional for what they do, but maybe there's a way to get that data out and to make it more meaningful, similar to what's happening from an enterprise perspective. That's the good place to start. That's the conversation. So Bean, what are we looking at here on the left-hand side?
Yeah, so we're looking at where your data sits and how you can access this and how scalable it is. And I usually like to say, you should start with what you have, looking at which data sources are already available to you. So for many companies, there's batch data. For many, there have been surveys and manual counting conducted. And then you look at that data and you start to analyze what it tells you. And you will probably find that it does not tell you the full story that you need. But with that exercise, you have established what more you would like to know. And then from my point of view would be the next step to look at what alternative methods can you apply to get to those insights. And again, there is for sure sources within the company that could be read out. So a lot of meeting rooms have CO2 sensors. You might have movement detection sensors. But then what all companies have is network connections that you could read out. So we're talking about Wi-Fi and LAN here. And then you would add and mix and match what you need according to your demand. So if you're looking at a whole portfolio on a building level, network connections is probably a good thing because it gives you a common denominator, because batch data might be different from site to site. And then if you have very specific use cases and questions, you might have to add specific sensor data to that question. But what I, in the end, want to say with this is, if you want to drive to the supermarket, you don't necessarily need a Cadillac. You might do with a Fiat Pinto as well. So that's my very pragmatic approach to this, actually.
I like it. Hey, let me bring in a comment from Kyle. First, let me say that I think I'm going to have to speed up because I keep running from the sun. It looks like I got about another 10 minutes before it washes my face out. So, so Kyle, you're absolutely right, my friend. You say here that a lot of companies are accurately, truly exploring digital twin technology to better understand the context and reasoning why buildings are being used. And I completely agree with you. I think your next comment certainly falls into that. So having data is one thing, making sense of it is another. And that is an amazing segue into our next slide. And I love what you said here. So with that being said, I'm going to go to the next slide and then I'm going to talk to that. So let me do that. So you're 100% right. Most companies understand they have a lot of data that they can get access to. And most companies during the pandemic created what I like to call the big table. The big table had the C-suite, the CFO, the corporate managers, of course, corporate business manager representatives, facilities and IT. And they were sitting around really discussing how to keep the business afloat and how to remove barriers to ensure that they kept the business afloat. And what a great time to continue that conversation. So what we've put together is about 500 insights that could be important to inform an overall aligned strategy for how enterprise IT systems and corporate real estate systems are supporting the employees in the organization. And we can give you some examples of that. But some of the things on the right-hand side, just as an example, is how do I know the teams are collaborating across the company? A better question would be, which teams are being very successful and at optimizing communication across the company in the environment that we're in? How do I identify them? How do I know what's working for them? And how do I replicate that across other teams? Those are insights that we can unlock by looking at the enterprise systems and within the facility systems. Some other things that we might be able to look at is, okay, what happens when we have a team that comes in just 1 day a week in the office? Is there increased communication and collaboration, or is there no difference in that? So again, Kyle, that to get to your point, to talk to your point, it's truly the insights that align to some sort of strategy that absolutely need to be thought about rather than just the data and what can be measured. Yeah. Sabine, anything to add here?
No, that's an excellent point, is that you don't start with looking at what technology is out there, what should I get, but you start with the mission that your company has, the goals that you are pursuing in your real estate organization. And then based on that, you define the data need. And only then you will look for the tools that could close that gap. Because if you get a tool and you have the data sitting somewhere, and it is exactly that point, and nobody's doing anything with it, if it's not actionable, then you just wasted money and not actually created value for the company.
Yeah, it's really difficult to understand what levers to pull or what actions to take in order to optimize your employee benefit. Well, what we're showing here, Sabine, is a slide that I think you worked with, your company worked with Memori on. I think I'm saying that right. And it really gives us a sense for how does corporate real estate fit into the post-COVID world and aligned corporate strategies. One of the things that immediately struck me as I was looking at this is being much more human-centric in our measurements of what's happening from a corporate real estate perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we will be looking at different measures. So typically when you were reporting on space efficiency, you would look at cost per square meter, or how many desks did you put into an office, how many employees were hosted in that office. So all very centered around, pure space efficiency. But the more important question is going to be, are the workplaces well adapted? Are they catering to their needs? Do employees like to work there? Which is very hard to grasp because it is around feelings, and feelings and emotions typically are not something you can easily measure, but it's something that you need to pinpoint down, coming from different angles and probably marrying different insights together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I think where the magic happens, right? It's understanding from the human perspective what they need and what they're doing to be productive, to understanding who and how they've risen above to contribute to the organizational goals, and then being able to replicate that. So really, to start the journey, what we're saying is it starts more or less at the C-suite. It starts within HR. What are the initiatives that we're seeing that we want to make sure that we have the right data for? And then we're able to gather that data from the enterprise systems and from the corporate real estate systems to really start getting very tactical on the improvements that need to be made and the types of spaces that we need to have, the types of applications that we need to standardize on to make it much more effective for us as we move forward in a post-pandemic world. Sorry, as I get caught up here. So here's a really good, I think, conversation, right? So this is a really high level example of what a workplace experience director might be looking at in terms of insights and taking data from enterprise and CRE, corporate real estate systems, and turning it into meaningful data. There's some general things on the right, on the left-hand side. Oops, there we go. Typical work from home interruption there. On the left-hand side, there are some insights that you might need as a workplace experience director. You're worried about digital, physical workplace optimization. You're worried about near real-time occupancy insights, health and wellness optimizations, certainly important to you. What are some of the metrics that would inform those types of initiatives? Well, we see them here. Satisfaction ratings, utilization rate, mobility rate, fluctuation, employee churn. Some of that's from HR. It's not all from a corporate real estate perspective, but you're worried about and thinking about how your sphere of influence is impacting those metrics. Sabine, thoughts on this?
Yeah, so it's actually tying into what I've said before. The answer to your question of if workplace experience is sufficient, it cannot be found in one metric alone, but it will be different dimensions that you're looking at. So we do have the utilization data here as an indicator, where you look at general patterns throughout the week, mobility of people, which types of workplaces they are using, so that as the evidence pool on the utilization side. But you will also look at, as you've said, the HR data, at employee churn, for example, and at satisfaction surveys to get the opinion from employees as well into that equation. And then there's also, you will have some specifications of the workplace to make sense, because you want to compare workplace settings with each other. So you need to know what you're actually comparing, what one workplace is providing in comparison to another, and how well accepted it is. Mm-hmm. And it's actually interesting. So if you have this continuous utilization data and check-ins, you will be able to actually measure the success of a workplace concept, because you will see if people are coming to the office, if they do like it or not. Because maybe even people from other locations will prefer to come to that new cool office environment because it's anyways closer to their home. So there's a lot of factors that also, besides the workplace settings themselves, is influencing the workplace experience. Mm-hmm. So commute is actually something I've heard a lot, that this is a big factor for people, that they prefer to be closer to their home. So they probably prefer to go to a more rural suburb location where there's still a hub to meet with their colleagues. But I think I'm veering off course a little here.
Oh, it's great. Let me just hop in for a second. Say, I would imagine that it changes by geography and by culture. So having some insights that are global, probably pretty important. What can you tell us a little bit about this slide?
Yeah, sure. So what we've seen as well, and it's a little bit of a funny development, triggered by the pandemic, CRE managers did have to be more operational, looking more at providing employees with the work equipment they need at home, making sure the environment of the office was still safe, and giving employees the tools that they need to work in this new setup, be it AV tools, as we've discussed earlier, or the tools to actually check in on utilization of the office. Is there still space so they could go, not going above a certain threshold. So the operational side of it was enhanced. And at the same time, we've heard from many that their strategic impact has increased as well. Suddenly, corporate real estate was in the focus of many C-suites, because the business resource real estate needs to be evaluated anew. So that's why we are actually looking at how both these dimensions can be supported with the data that we are generating, with actually, showing where your opportunities are.
You know, I think that is absolutely key to where we're headed here. And again, I apologize for the sun washing my face out. I'm in Chicago. It's winter. We never see the sun except for today.
Don't apologize for
so there you go. Don't apologize for the sun showing in Chicago. That's a fact. But to get back on point here, having the data is good. Having the insights from the data, better. Being able to internalize those insights to get to very important tactical planning from a program perspective, from a program management perspective, ensuring that you're pulling the levers in the right direction, that you're having the impact that you need on your global employee base. That's really what we're saying, right? That's the big change in the post-pandemic world. We were starting to have some conversations about how do we measure what's happening in the space. We've vastly accelerated that. It might have been years before we're at the conversation where we're at now, but here we are. We now have the ability to look at data and get the insights and inform a very strategic action plan that helps us get our corporations back on track, to help get the economy global economy restarted again in a way that is incredibly innovative, that we wouldn't have had the power to do so before. And I think we even talked about that a little earlier. Then we've taken some of the guardrails off because we had to. So now is really the right time to start thinking about what some of those incredibly innovative pilot programs are. Right now, right in the middle of the second wave of the pandemic, is when we need to start thinking about what happens when we're out of this, right? And the vaccines are coming, and we know that we need human interaction. What do those spaces look like? How do we pilot them? How do we get the data to show that they're working? How do we inform our next series of projects to show that we're moving in the right direction? To that end, I'm going to say thank you, Sabine. Right at 40 minutes, that's exactly where we want to be. For those of you who are looking at this recorded session, it is available from a recorded session, although we're live right now. You can use your phone. There's a QR code here that will take you to our landing page. I, right now, am going to attempt to, there we go, put out in the chat, again, for you folks on YouTube that are joining us live, in the chat window right now is a link that goes to a landing page. And from there, you'll be able to download a white paper, which goes into a little bit more detail on the conversation topics that we've talked about today. We're absolutely interested in hearing from you. We do a lot of research with workplace strategists, with directors of IT, with pretty much anybody to help better understand the impact that corporate real estate and technology are having on the attainment of corporate success. And we want to be able to bring that back into some proven guidelines from a corporate real estate workplace design perspective and from a technology utilization perspective. Sabine, thank you very much. Truly appreciate the time that you've had today. Our landing page has Sabine's contact information at the bottom. You simply type a question and you hit ask, and it goes to Sabine. Sabine will be able to answer that. Thank you, everyone, again, for your time, truly. Sabine, any final thoughts? Well, there is a final thought. I'm going to ask you this question. What is the one thing that you want to leave this audience with? And we'll end the show with that.
Yeah. So, well, we all know that we're facing a new situation and that we have to answer these questions. And we can do that with our gut feelings. But honestly, not doing it with data is like walking blindfolded on a rope over a cliff. Yes, there's no chance of getting it right. You by chance maybe, but you want to have a solid foundation to make those decisions on so that you can actually sleep at night.
Chip says it best. Thank you, Chip. That really was very good. And thank you. And thanks to all of you out there. Until our next show. Bye.
Thank you.